Hello and welcome to Mind Shifters Radio. I'm Tim Hayes. I'm your host for the first hour. And today is Friday, November 12th, 2021. As always, we're grateful to everyone who's joining us here today, whether you're listening live or through the archives, as we spend another couple of hours teaching and supporting people in using some of the most powerful, effective, efficient, and accessible tools I've ever encountered. These tools are available absolutely free. Thanks to the tireless efforts of Dr. Michael and Jeannie Rice, these tools are available on the website at whyagain.org. If you go to that webpage and click on the Start Here link in the upper left-hand corner, it'll take you to a page where you can download and read Chapter 24 of Dr. Michael Rice's book. The book is titled, Why Is This Happening to Me Again? And that specific chapter of that book contains a narrative description of the primary tool in this work. That tool is called the Reality Management Worksheet, sometimes called the Reality Management Wake-Up Sheet, and it's a tool I've been using for great effect for over 17 years to improve the quality of my life and most of my relationships and to turn any negative emotional experience I have into part of the infallible guidance system that every one of us has been given. You can also download the actual worksheet process itself. It's a simple PDF file. Click on it, download it, print it off, and use it as often as you'd like. You can also download a whole host of audio files of shows just like this one, where people have been stepped through that worksheet process and or given powerful testimonials about how the use of that worksheet process has greatly benefited their lives. You can also go to your app store and type in the 3 words, Heartland Aramaic Forgiveness, and get access to a completely free and private app that contains the Reality Management Worksheet, an abbreviated version of that worksheet process, and a copy of the Dragon Klingon game, which is a wonderful way to introduce these tools to even younger audiences. We hope people do that soon and often, because that frequently leads to comments or questions. And if you have any of those, give us a call and we can discuss them. Our call-in number is 563-999-3581. And if you call that number and press 1, it'll put a little question mark by your phone number. I can announce you by your area code, and we can have a conversation. Alternatively, you can send an email. You can email me at tjh@mindshifters-academy.org. You can email Jeannie Rice at jeanie@whyagain.org. That's whyagain.org. And we hope you do that. We hope it's something you choose. It certainly helps us bring this show, this next hour or 2 hours that we have, into alignment with our intention. And our intention with this show is to be of service. So please, if you have any tips for us on how we can be of service, let us know. 563-999-3581. We're also doing the Course in Miracles workbook lessons this year. This is the 316th day of the year. And the Course in Miracles workbook lesson today simply reads, all gifts I give my brothers and sisters are also my own. The commentary reads, as every gift my brothers and sisters give is mine, so every gift I give belongs to me. Each one allows a past mistake to go and leave no shadow on the holy mind that the Creator loves. The Creator's grace is given me in every gift a brother or sister has received throughout all time and past all time as well. My treasure house is full, and angels watch its open doors, that no one gift is lost, and only more are added. Let me come to where my treasures are and enter in where I am truly welcome and at home among the gifts that the Creator has given us. Creator, I would accept your gifts today I do not recognize them, yet I trust you, and that you who give them will provide the means by which I can observe them, behold them, see their worth, and cherish only them as what I want. The way the world is unfolding is the gift that I need to accept and cherish. Pam Grout, in her Course in Miracles Experiment Book Lesson 316, is titled Pam and the Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day. She quotes U.S. Anderson as saying, "Refuse to accept apparent delay and detour as anything other than the perfect path." Pam writes, "Despite all rumors to the contrary, I still occasionally feel like unflavored gelatin. I recently had one of those days. I was in Grand Haven, Michigan, recording the audio version of my book, Living Big, at a fancy schmancy studio owned by Amazon. My flight was delayed, so I got in late. I had a headache. I had to show up bright and early, and the producer was quick to point out my glaring inability to pronounce such words as Dostoevsky and joie de vivre. Now I know good and well the only thing wrong in this situation was my attitude and my grumpy thoughts. But, like a squid, I kept squirting out, 'Woe is me,' ink that put up a smokescreen between me and my highest intention. My highest intention is that unceasing joy that we all have access to. Finally, after leaving the studio and being unable to even muster the energy to walk very far along the gorgeous Lake Michigan beaches," she writes in parentheses, "I didn't even leave my normal beach affirmation," close parentheses. She says, "I returned to my motel room and went to bed. I woke up the next day feeling bright and sunny and was even grateful for the horrible, terrible, no good, very bad day. And here is why. Point number one, that day made me achingly aware of how far I've come. Being disgruntled used to be my way of life. Going back for a little peek confirmed that's not that much fun. I don't want to live there. Point number two, I was able to be kind to myself in spite of it all. Okay, so I had a less than stellar day. So what? I used my magic words. What are they? Here they are. Quote, 'It's okay,' close quotes. I used my magic words and shrugged it off as the perfect unfoldment and realization, see point one, that I'm on the right path and I've come a long, long way. Point number three. Lastly, I finally learned how to pronounce my favorite word, joie de vivre, a French word that pretty much describes my life now that I've officially broken up with the discontented grumpiness that used to be my every thought." So that's our Course in Miracles experiment and the Course in Miracles workbook lessons for today. And as usual, we've got about 50 minutes to entertain your comments or questions or pursue a topic that you would like to explore. Our call-in number is 563-999-3581. If you call that number and press 1, we can have a conversation. How can I support you? How can we support you? We have more than just a few topics we might engage in. We've had pushing 11 years. It'll be 11 years in January. And we're sitting here halfway through November. So 10 and a half years of topics, books, worksheet processes, targeted journaling that Michael calls the Mind Shifter tool, questions about 3 early memories of conflict, questions about how to apply these tools in your life. What would be of service to you today? 563-999-3581. If you call that number and press 1, we can have a conversation. I routinely have conversations with people who are very upset And they think they are upset about the events in their lives or in the events in the lives of people they love. What we understand with this work is I'm not upset with or about the events in my life or the events in the lives of people I love. I'm upset because of the interpretation I'm choosing to apply to the life events as I see them, to the images that show up in my mind's eye. And once I wake up to the fact that I'm only, always, and forever the author of my emotions, and that any negative emotion I experience is a creation of the interpretation I've chosen in that moment, and I've been exposed to tools like the ones at whyagain.org, then I have the infinite capacity to choose again, to choose anew, and to have a life that unfolds entirely differently than, as Pam Grout was talking about in her book, in her lesson today, than what I've been doing routinely for most of my young life. So, if you've got a situation in your life right now that as it's unfolding, you're choosing an interpretation for it that is resulting in you having a negative emotional experience, I'll strongly encourage you to call a time out for yourself. Take one of those healing breaths that has you hold the breath at the top of the inhale and slowly exhale, which for most people is an effective way to initiate the rest and digest response, or what some people call the parasympathetic response, and choose anew. Ask to understand how it is that you're creating the interpretation that's generating the emotion you're experiencing right now. And do it from the observation that since every situation is interpreted differently by different people, there's an entirely real chance that if you choose a slightly different interpretation, you will have a very different experience of the moment, even if nothing outside of you changes in that moment. I was working with a mother recently, and she's had life unfolding in a way that isn't what she wants. She has a son who is changing what he said he always wanted to do. And the mother is convinced that because of the way she's interpreting the life experience in the situation, she's convinced that this means he's turning out exactly like his father. And not the good parts of his father, the not-so-good parts of his father. And she's absolutely convinced that that's the case. And I pointed out to her, we've talked about the benefits of using a tool like the Gentle Art of Blessing that's written about as a book title and as a process by Pierre Pradervand. And the difficulty that she's having with that right now is that as she looks at it, she's convinced that who and what her son is displaying is exactly like the not-so-good parts of his father. And I pointed out to her this one simple fact. I asked her to breathe, soften like we suggested. That was the first step. Take that breath, pause at the top of the inhale, slowly exhale down till it's 10 seconds or longer in the exhale. And then I just asked her to just observe this one fact. I'm just going to put one piece of evidence on the table in front of her to see if this helps her shift out of the fear-based perception and fear-generating conclusions that she's pouring her mind energy into. And I said, let me just remind you of one critical factor. Your ex-husband did not have you as a mother. And I had to remind her to breathe. But that's just one really good example of how once we hold on to a negative conclusion, we formulated a negative conclusion and we're holding on to it and pouring our mind energy into it, we miss important aspects of the actuality of our lives. And from there, it started to soften her perspective, and she started to realize, you know what? He spent a lot of years all through high school wanting to do this one career path, and then he met somebody in college, and now, just like that, lickety-split, he's changed his thought. Well, guess what? There's nothing that says he can't change his thought again in the next day, week, month, year, and either find a different path that will light him up and give him a sense of fulfillment and utilize his skills well, or return to the one that he'd always wanted. In the meantime, this mother, my patient, has the choice to make. What is she going to pour her mind energy into? And when she does that, what kind of emotional energy is she going to be generating that she then, because she can't help it, is going to be pouring into the energy field between her and her son? And that's what we're all faced with. You know, we have the choice. Right? Life unfolds as it unfolds. We get to choose how we interpret and respond to those events unfolding. As we choose an interpretation and a response, that's what creates our experience of life. And so, do you have a situation in your life right now that as you look at it, and as it shows up in your mind, you're generating some negative emotional states from it, and or believing that that outside experience is causing your negative emotional state? If that's so, we invite you to step into what we've learned in this work, what we can observe for ourselves directly on a regular basis. I am the author of my emotions. If you have an emotional state active in your mind, it's the result of how you're choosing to interpret and respond to life. It's not the result of the way life is unfolding around you. And once you become aware of the active role you're playing in creating your emotional state and how powerfully that shapes your experience of life, and if you've been introduced to tools like the ones at whyagain.org, all kinds of options unfold and open in front of you. And we're here to support you in exploring that, experiencing it, and developing a facility with, if not eventually a mastery of the tools that can help put you back in charge of the emotional state and the experience of life you're creating moment to moment. So, 563-999-3581. Call that number, press 1, let us know how we can support you. Is this making sense? Does this sound like a bunch of gibberish? Is there anything about this that is resonating as truthful for you or potentially useful for you and you don't yet know how to put it into effect in your life? Let us know. 563-999-3581. It is that shift in perspective that so dramatically changes our experience of life. And that's what we're here to assist people in creating. How can we help you create a shift in your perspective, a shift in the experience of your life, whether it's through a suggested change in focus or whether it's the actual application of a reality management worksheet? That's what we're here for. How can we support you? I was amazed at the synchronicity again this morning. I was listening to some of the Pema Chodron book that we were talking about that I've been listening to for the past few days. And I believe the title of that book is When Things Fall Apart. I have several of her books, but it's from that book, When Things Fall Apart, that I heard, again, the story about the student warrior who was really enjoying the fact that the Buddhist tradition says do no harm. And in the middle of her enjoying that, she was told by her teacher that she had to do battle with fear. And she said, I don't want to do battle with anyone. And the teacher persisted, and eventually the student relented and prepared to do battle with fear. And she went out on the battlefield, and fear was there, and she bowed very respectfully 3 times, which was impressive to fear. And fear said, well, thank you so much. And then she said, may I have permission to do battle with you? And fear, again, very impressed, said, well, thank you for asking permission. And then the student warrior asked fear, how can I defeat you? And the response from fear was, well, here's the thing. My weapons are that I talk real fast and I get very close to your face. Then you get completely unnerved and you do whatever I say. So the thing is, if you don't do what I tell you, I have no power. You can listen to me, you can have respect for me, you can even be convinced by me, but if you don't do what I say, I have no power. And as the story goes, it was in that way that the student warrior learned how to defeat fear. Now, in the example of the mother that I was just talking about, she was being overwhelmed with fear. She was tearfully overwhelmed with fear in my office. And she was continuing to view her life situation and her son's life situation through the picture her mind was showing her as she developed all that fear. And she was starting to think about what she could do and should do through the filter of that fear. And it's very, very clear and easy to say she was doing what fear told her to do. She was crying, which is what fear told her to do. She was repeating the same helpless, hopeless, desperate thoughts over and over again. That's what fear was telling her to do. She was crafting whatever communications she would have with her son, driven by the perception she was creating in her mind when she was engulfed in that energy of fear. That's doing what fear tells you to do. And that was being very unproductive for her. She was feeling worse and worse by the minute. So I offered a slightly different perspective. That's all. Just here. Put this actual observable fact into the field of view that you're using to generate all of these negative conclusions, and just breathe and soften and see what difference this might make. When that happens, she gets a different view, her perception shifts, and the fear that she was generating and then listening to also shifted. When the field of view shifts, the perception that shows up in her mind was completely different, and she was able to see whatever was going on without automatically generating the fear, and a range of new options appeared within her field of vision. This is almost exactly what we were discussing last night in the support group with somebody who is stuck in a situation, and every time they look at it, they keep looking at the same aspects of their current situation. And the point that we keep trying to make is, yes, this is true. Yes, what you're looking at is true. I'm not telling you you're hallucinating this, or that there isn't a problem here, or that that situation isn't happening. And yet, almost always, whenever I have a negative emotional state going, what I can know with certainty is that I'm not seeing all there is to see. And even if I'm seeing all there is to see, there's something amiss in the interpretation I've chosen to apply to those data points. So, time and again, this primary observation becomes, more and more useful to me. That primary observation is written in every reality management worksheet, and it says, if I'm in pain, my thinking is in error. So if I end up with any kind of a negative emotional thought, or negative emotional experience, or a negative thought, I can know that if I ask to be shown a different way to look at this, if I soften and breathe and back up so that my field of view becomes broader and more clear, I will see options, possibilities, interpretations, potential moves that I didn't see when I was generating the negative emotional state. What we're offering is a set of tools and steps for ushering ourselves into a different perception. How can I perceive this moment differently? How can I acquire, some would call it a bird's eye view, or the 30,000-foot perspective, or what Michael Rice might call the spiritual faculty of true perception? How can I acquire an access point of view or a point of view that gives me access to the Christ mind, or the one mind that they talk about in the Christian Science work? There is only mind. There is only one mind. And in one of the Christian Science lectures I listened 2 years ago, it was a very well done lecture, and the woman talked about how she frequently gets questions from people. How can I know if the thought I'm thinking is accurate and true, or if it's just my fear and my ego and my errant thought? Lecturer gave a very nice description that boils down to this idea of, if I can trace the thought back to a God thought, one that would be, coming from the Creator itself, then I'm probably okay sticking with it and acting from it. But if it's got a negative emotional state in it, that means it wouldn't be traceable to the Creator, to the one mind, because the Creator, the one mind, is about Creator. It's about light. It's about love, creation, the flow of life, extending, expanding, constantly creating and moving forward. And so if I have a negative thought, a negative emotion coming from my thought, I won't be able to trace it back to the mind of the Creator, to the one holy mind that all things are expanding from and existing within. Just another way to say what we talk about in this work. If I'm in pain, mental, emotional, or physical pain, my thoughts are in error. And when that happens, and I recognize it, and I decide not to wallow in it, but to make use of the awareness that, wow, I must be in error in thought, I can apply a tool like the Reality Management Worksheet. What does that do? Well, in the first 3 steps of that work, it has me map out what I'm doing with my thought, how I'm generating emotion with that thought, what my mind is telling me has to change in the world before I can be happy again or have peace. And I put that all out there. I get very clear about that, and then I choose to let it all go and cancel my certainty and say, like Course in Miracles in the course in the lesson, A New Beginning says, maybe you don't want to say you're wrong, but at least you can acknowledge that you don't like how you're feeling. And once that happens, then you can ask, or you can make the statement, I hope there's another way for me to look at this situation, and then breathe and soften and see what unfolds. If I cancel everything I think I want, if I put away my trifling treasures, and I leave a clean and open space where my field of view can shift and broaden, chances are really good I'll start to see options. I'll start to experience emotional energies that I couldn't feel when I was holding on to my need to be right and what I thought was going on while I was generating the negative emotional experience. And that's the core of this work, right? I mean, I will probably remain forever grateful for discovering what's the thing I can't. Most of us have heard the phrase, "Oh, the tangled web we weave when first we practice to deceive." So when I start lying, I'm creating a mess for myself. Every time I tell a lie, I add to the complexity, and now I'm going to have to remember what lie I'm telling and all of the parts of my life and thoughts and experiences that I have to hide so that the lie isn't exposed. It just gets very complicated. And I've heard that, "Oh, the tangled web we weave when first we practice to deceive." I've heard that ever since I was a child. But then I got introduced to more and more research on perception and the idea that our perception is not a passive thing. It's very, very active, and we're all always creating the pictures that show up in our mind. We're all always interpreting the sound waves that reach our ears. And we're all always interpreting the physical sensations that get registered in our energy system when some kind of an energy reaches our nerve endings. And each of us is creating our own pictures, sensations, interpretations, meanings all day, every day. And there can be 17 of us in a room, and something can go on in one part of the room, and you can have 15 or 16 or 17 different interpretations about what happened and what it meant. So, I've come to amend that saying, "Oh, the tangled web we weave, when first we practice to deceive," and these days I say, "Oh, the tangled web we weave, when first we practice to perceive." Every perception I create is just a rough guess, a guesstimate of what's actually happening. If you want more on this, you can watch the enlightening video by Anil Seth, Anilseth, on YouTube. If you type in his name, you'll probably get there, but if you add the word hallucinate or the hallucinate perception or perception, you'll have access to a series of talks. Any one of them is enough to watch. There's one that's about 17 to 19 minutes, if I remember correctly, that's a TED Talk. But he's a scientist who's researching perception. And he's there to talk about how every one of us is hallucinating our perception. And what we call reality in our culture, in our world, is really just a consensus hallucination. When enough of us get together and agree on our hallucinations, we call it reality. Michael Rice in his work has a nice convention that helps clarify this, and it really helps when you're looking at the Course in Miracles where they aren't that clear about it. The difference between the actual world, actuality, and what we perceive, each of us creates our own reality through the process of perception. So, oh, the tangled web I weave when first I practice to perceive. Well, if my perception on a regular basis is wrong, how am I going to ever know what it takes to correct it? The good news is we've been given the mechanism. The mechanism is the awareness that if I'm generating a negative emotional state, the perception I've chosen is inaccurate. And if I'm generating a negative emotional state, if I can wake up enough from the hallucination and the cultural conditioning to understand that's not being done to me. This mother and son combination I was referring to earlier, that son is not doing something to his mother to generate her sadness. And if she can wake up to realize that, then she can step into the use of tools to dismantle her sadness and fear and free up her perception of what's happening with her son so she has a chance to actually be available to send him loving energy and to be a positive influence in his life moving forward, regardless of what he chooses. But if she comes from the belief that he's causing her deep sadness because he's changed his life goals, or because he's not as connected to the family system, or not as committed to the goals that he had for his life when he was in high school. If she's convinced that that's causing her sadness, then she's a hopeless, helpless victim, and there's nothing for her to do. The good news is, one of Michael Rice's favorite quotes from the early years was, "There are no victims, only volunteers." And so if this mother wakes up and realizes that she is generating a significant amount of negative emotion and that she doesn't like the feeling of sitting in that sadness or that fear, then she can apply the tools and shift her perception. She can move herself closer to what Michael Rice would call the spiritual faculty of true perception, which is this ability to see the world as it actually is, to see everything in the world as neutral. All events are neutral. Many great spiritual traditions teach us this. And that every time we generate a negative emotional state because of how we're choosing to interpret and respond to the world, it distorts our view. It limits what we're able to see, and it keeps us stuck in an unproductive pattern that dramatically decreases the probability that we will be able to do something to free ourselves, to have the liberty to act in a healthy, loving, respectful, compassionate way. And most of the people that are drawn to work like this want to be able to choose a healthy, loving, compassionate, productive way to respond to life. So, our call-in number is 563-999-3581. Let us hear from you. What's on your mind? How is this talk today landing? What's it resonating for you? What might you have a fear or an upset about that if we discussed it a little bit or helped you see a slightly different aspect of your life or a shift in perspective, it might benefit you? 563-999-3581. Call that number, press 1, we can have a conversation. Alternatively, you can email me at tjh@mindshifters-academy.org, and we'll do our best to address your comments or questions on the show, and if you're not able to catch it live, you can listen to it in the archives. I know I haven't talked about this in a while, but those archives are a very useful resource for me. And because it's been pushing 11 years now, it really isn't feasible for me to go back and scan through the archives. They aren't all labeled well, etc. But one of the many things Jeannie Rice has done is curate out certain, what we would call highlight shows, and list them as best of shows or highlight shows. And you can find those by going to whyagain.org and click on the link that says Start Here. And on that next page, as you scroll down, you'll see something that talks about a list of MP3s. And that list of MP3s is the curated shows. That's a great place to start after it says special MP3s pulled from shows with instructions, testimonials, and support on the wake-up sheets. So for some people, that's where they go first. The recommendation for a long time now has been download and read Chapter 24 of Dr. Michael Rice's book, and or the worksheet process itself. And the next step that most people find very useful is listening to some of these special MP3s pulled from the Mind Shifters radio show, where people have been stepped through the process. And there are quite a few of those shows that are actually just a recording of somebody being stepped through the use of the worksheet process. Some of them are about testimonials, but it is an incredibly powerful resource. Even for me, I have benefited greatly by going back and listening to shows. Sometimes I'll get the podcast up on my phone and click the phone into the rack on my bike and ride and listen when I'm not obsessed with the bird sounds and the nature sounds. It's a very useful tool. Some of the, as I say in the introduction to most of these shows lately, the tools that are available at whyagain.org are some of the most powerful, effective, efficient, and accessible tools I've ever encountered in my over 47 years of doing therapy. And that's pretty amazing to me. I've actually gotten into some temporary fantasy hot water with people because I've talked about how I think it's kind of goofy that we are giving this away absolutely free. The quality, the power, the effectiveness, and the accessibility of these tools is the kind of thing that many other teachers, seminars, workshops, websites are charging not just hundreds, but thousands of dollars for. The coaching, the tutorials, the worksheets themselves, the hours of recordings of people discussing how to use these in their lives, absolutely free. And that's kind of goofy because we're living in a society where you have to get paid so that you can, fulfill your financial obligations to the mortgage or the landlord and heating bills and cell phone usage, and we're giving this away absolutely free, which some people say diminishes the value. And I like to correct them rather quickly and say, no, please, let's wake up, let's careful with the words. I can't diminish the value of something that actually has value. I can diminish my perception of its value. I can change how it is perceived within me, but I can't touch the value of something. Something that has true value has that inherently. These tools may not be for everybody. There are people who may not like the fact, as a matter of fact, one of the more common reasons I've heard from people, very bright people, very well-intentioned people, when they say this isn't for me, they'll say the worksheet is too intellectual for me. And I just interpret that as to say it doesn't fit their style, but it's certainly not too intellectual, because what the worksheet says is put all that intellectual stuff on the page in the first 3 steps and then cancel it all and step into an energetic, emotional, intuitive, creative flow and watch how your life changes. So it's definitely not about figuring things out. It's definitely not about using your conscious logical mind. The core of this work is understood as needing to shift my perception whenever I use that perception, or that perception gets used by my automatic processes to generate any negative emotion and any negative thought pattern. So it's kind of goofy, but we're doing it anyway. We're giving it away for free, the very things that the very kinds of things that many, many other people will charge you thousands of dollars for, at least hundreds per session or episode. And they're available absolutely free, and they're available through the archive, and you can access them in the middle of the night when you wake up. You can have it going when you're playing your, board games with friends. You can do it while you're have it in the background while you're doing dishes. You're on a bike ride. You're doing your indoor exercising in the winter. I highly recommend tapping into some of those highlight shows that have been curated out by Jeannie Rice on the Why Again website. Click on the Start Here link and scroll down and get access to those MP3 files. And then if you do, give us a call. Let us know how the use of the tools and the archives is benefiting you. And who knows? That conversation itself might end up as a highlight show. Every time that happens, it benefits the caller, and it also benefits anybody else who's listening or anybody else who stumbles across it in the archives. But that's our goal. Our goal is to help every one of us who ends up generating a negative emotion or a recurring negative thought to help us shift our process and our perception so that we're restored to what Michael Rice would call true perception. We're restored to a less distorted view of the actuality of our lives. You are the miracle of life, the miracle of the creative energy expressing in form. You, right now, today, as you listen to this. And everything that your mind wants to tell you about how you're not tall enough, you're not smart enough, you're not pretty enough, you're not worth enough, is an error. And all of the awe that you might experience when you look at the Grand Canyon or you see an amazing sunrise or sunset, all of that is your essence. And your essence is every bit as magnificent as anything you've ever seen out in nature, or you've watched somebody else do or create in art, or you've seen in kittens or puppies playing. Your essence is that and more. It's what can't ever be added unto or taken away from. It is what in the ancient Aramaic they might refer to as original blessing, the opposite of what some of the Catholic teachings would say as original sin. But the original blessing is that which cannot be chipped, dented, rusted, faded, or broken in any way, and that is at the core of your existence. That is the truth of your awareness. Some would call it soul. I was listening to a podcast this morning from a young woman. Psychiatria is a podcast, and there's a free-range psychiatry that is a website, and these are some psychiatrist professionals who've decided to treat mental health issues with a holistic or a functional or an integrative approach, and that I lost my train of thought. And that podcast has been started by a young woman who works with these psychiatrists to build this practice. And she's young, she's creative, she's got a good speaking voice, and she wants to increase awareness for alternatives to treatment of psychiatric and psychological problems, alternatives to the conventional model. And the conventional model these days is, here's a list of symptoms, I'm going to check these, and you've got those, and so I'm going to give you this medication. And so this is exactly the same fundamental purpose as the Journey's Dream not-for-profit that I'm on the board of and that I have been doing the On Your Mind podcast for. So if you want some ideas about how to help somebody who's going through a psychotic episode or a depression or an anxiety issue, or they've been labeled schizophrenic, or they've been labeled manic depressive, or they've been on these psychotropic medications and they're still anxious and depressed, and they've gained a lot of weight, and they're having trouble getting off of them. There's a whole, I think we've got 79 published podcasts on the On Your Mind podcast hosted by Journey's Dream. So if you go to journeysdream.org/podcast, there's another wonderful free resource. And we've interviewed integrative psychiatrists, we've interviewed people who've had their own lived experience with being diagnosed and giving meds, having been given meds that they didn't want, being hospitalized against their will, etc. And that's another wonderful free resource, On Your Mind podcast, hosted by Journey's Dream. If you go to journeysdream.org/podcast, you can get access to the list of shows and make use of that. So we've reached the end of our hour. I believe Michelle is here, so I will just remind us all that we come from love. We're made of this stuff we call love. We actually are love, and everything else is false. Welcome, Michelle.
Yes, whenever you're ready. Okay.
Come in, Michelle. You're unmuted. You're on.
No, you're good.
We can hear you. So I will mute you and then unmute you to maybe get your attention. Welcome, Michelle.
Oh, was I talking? I'm sorry.
You were on.
I was getting ready and I didn't realize that you could hear me. My apologies. Hi, Tim. How are you?
I'm well. Are you hosting this next hour?
Yes, I am.
All right. Well, have a lovely show and take it away.
All right. Thank you.